Thank you, Jamie, for starting the recording. Great. All right, let's get started. Just a second. All right, I'm all set up. Thanks for your patience. By way of overview, our agenda tonight for the presentation, I will provide introductions. We will explain the origin of this particular legislation, and then next describe the planning issue that it is attempting to address. And then we'll get into the details of what this ordinance is. And then we have ample time for a question and answer, comments, all your thoughts, and then I'll stop the screen share at that point, and then we will get in after answering everyone's questions, hearing all their comments, we'll get into next steps. I don't think that I need to, based on the number of attendees tonight, limit your comments, but do be mindful of others that are in attendance and know that others may want to be heard as well. All right, just for by way of introduction, there are some staff here this evening, at least myself, Kevin Collin. I am the zoning administrator for the city of Sacramento. I'm the lead staff for this proposed ordinance. I'm supported tonight by Jamie Mosler, our associate planner. She's behind the scenes helping with the Zoom controls. And unfortunately, Greg Samlin, our planning director, got called away on a council item tonight, so he's unable to join us. You may have heard a voice earlier. Our council member, Laloe from District 2 has joined us as well this evening, and he's listening in. All right, where did this start? The origin of this legislation goes back to August of 2021. There is a process by which the city council and its members may propose legislation for them collectively to consider. We call it a log in staff, and there was a log request made by District 2 back in August of 2021 to address some patterns of historical land use and zoning decisions that were perceived to be negatively impacting the North Sacramento community. From that point moving forward, in coordination and conversation with the District 2 council member and staff in June, we provided a briefing on some of the broader issues that were brought up in that log request and seeking direction on how to proceed. That subsequently led to a more focused analysis of what incompatibilities in particular to focus on in a legislative sense, and that's what we'll discuss this evening, where in March, direction was received and staff proceeded with drafting an interim ordinance. Now, what is this ordinance attempting to do? Part of that chronology of events that I just shared included a review of development activities. So these are essentially land use permits or entitlements. This means the same thing that staff evaluated over a time horizon. In this case, we looked at 5 years of permit activity in the North Sacramento area. And what you see on the screen before you is reflective of this 5-year analysis. Finding a pattern, what was going on, we identified that there were particular land uses that were receiving either approval, and they were proceeding, in not all instances, but in many. And what we see on the right-hand side in terms of the legend, you see different colors for status. You see icons that are showing land uses that are primarily reliant on commercial trucks. And they're located on a map, which is yellow and purple. The yellow areas are not industrial zoning, they're residential zoning. If you look at the purple areas, they are currently zoned industrial. What we see in this slide is a grouping of them up in the northeast area, in the Robla area, and somewhat also along the south to the south of Interstate 80. For example, a few along Pell and then down along Main, and then just south of the freeway as well in the Norwood Industrial Park area. The red line here identifies the area affected by the proposed ordinance. Another aspect that we, aside from the permit activity that we noticed, we also observed existing land use patterns in the North Sacramento area. What this slide is showing, I'll click one more time, in these red rectangle areas, there are darker shades of purple that are denoting industrial zone property, which currently has non-conforming residential uses. This is an artifact of history where under prior plans jurisdiction, that development was authorized in these locations that was residential and is these are homes in many instances, and they're occupied by families. And in looking at this permit activity, we notice that they are occurring in close proximity, these developments that are being approved to the homes. To give a visual representation of, well, what does this mean? We're looking at dots on the map and colors of different parcel shading. If we're looking at this from an overhead view, here's a Google screenshot showing the proximity and what this could mean in terms of an adjacency. So what here we see is a land use which looks to be a commercial truck storage, and it has located at a parcel on Dry Creek Road, and it has expanded to the north in proximity to a row of homes which are, although industrial zone, they are occupied by homes. And so in terms of land use and that being incompatible or not being a good neighbor in terms of noise level, lighting, air emissions, that raises some concerns for staff. Additionally, looking beyond the abutting or neighborly aspect of this and considering what happens on a property like this with trucks and where those trucks go, we observed in looking at the roadway network in this part of Sacramento. And you'll note in this slide what we see is Santa Ana Avenue, which essentially is a paved surface. There are not curbs, there are no gutters, there are no sidewalks. There is power along a side of the right of way, but there may not even be street lights. There are basic urban amenities that are essentially absent that we find in other areas of the city. And in trying to envision how a commercial truck reliant land use would be distributing its trips out into a roadway network, this raised a concern. And this slide, you can see there's a church denoted on the monument sign on the left. And then further down Santa Ana Avenue, you see, in fact, a property on the market with that industrial zoning and a neighbor across the way that is a residential home. So observing this existing land use pattern in the community, the permit activity that is occurring, we looked at, well, what do our current regulations have to say? Like, how is this development happening? And what this slide is identifying are the land uses that were included on that color-coded map of contractor storage yard, terminal yard, trucking terminal yard, heavy truck sales, storage, rental, as well as service and repair, and a warehouse distribution land uses. That these are all permitted to locate in the zoning districts so that were in purple on that earlier slide, M1, M1S, M2, MT, and they're allowed in those zones from an initial new development context through a site plan and design review process. This process is architectural only. The land use is by right. The land use is presumed to be appropriately located in this zone, and the aesthetics is the regulatory control that the current code provides. Now, I want to pause here and pull back a little bit broader and think about, well, this is the activity that's occurred, the planning issue. How is that relating to what's happening presently with the city and its planning efforts? You may or may not be aware that the city is presently updating its general plan. A general plan is the constitution for development for every city and county in California. It's mandated by state law. And there is an element of a general plan that is now required by state law through Senate Bill 1100. It is called an environmental justice element. And these elements are focused on disadvantaged communities. And what does that mean? It means a low-income area that's disproportionately affected by environmental pollution, other hazards that can lead to negative health effects, exposure, and environmental degradation. And what we saw with the development activity is that, as you see in red, much, although not all, of the area subject to the proposed ordinance is located within or adjacent to a disadvantaged area that is subject to these effects. The general plan that I mentioned is expected to be reviewed and adopted by City Council in February of next year. I misspoke. It's Senate Bill 1000. That state law and this environmental justice element is proposed to be implemented in a number of policies, one of which is on the screen here that relates to this ordinance that we're discussing this evening, and that's Environmental Justice Policy A5. This policy directs the city to develop zoning standards applicable to new and existing industrial and manufacturing developments to minimize or avoid adverse effects related to air quality, noise, or safety on sensitive populations in disadvantaged communities and other areas of the city where industrial and manufacturing uses are near residential uses, such as the Roebla neighborhood. With that anticipated policy adoption, staff, in considering the log request from District 2, thought of different mechanisms whereby legislation could be adopted and identified what's called an interim ordinance in the city of Sacramento. On the screen, I've highlighted some particular texts that will help you understand, well, what does that mean? Ordinances are adopted in many jurisdictions throughout our state and the nation, and this is a particular instrument that we have here that's not a moratorium. It's not a permanent ordinance. It's a bridge, if I could use that analogy, between point A and point B. And in city code, it provides for alternative or additional processes, rules, regulations, or requirements or prohibitions on any permits or uses that are the subject of a contemplated general plan that the city council or the planning agency is considering or studying or intends to consider or study. So in this instance, we are observing the general plan has a pretty robust environmental justice analysis. It has policies that are formulated. They have been studied and they are intended to be studied further through the policy that I shared. And so rather than prohibit uses through an interim ordinance, this red text of alternative or additional processes is what we're going to focus on for an interim ordinance that's under consideration today. What would the ordinance do? I'll move through this in a few steps. This interim ordinance would add a new permit requirement. It's called a conditional use permit. It's a discretionary permit, requires an application to the city of Sacramento. For the land uses of contractor storage yard, trucking terminal yard, tractor or heavy truck sales, storage rental, or tractor or heavy truck service rental, or warehouse distribution center, they would require a commission level use permit under certain circumstances. And when I say commission level, what I mean by that is the Planning and Design Commission, which is appointed by City Council. Those land uses would require a commission level use permit when they're located in those industrial zones that are on the screen, M1, M1S, M2, and MT. When they are also in those zones and located within the red line that I had on the slides at the beginning, which are essentially the city limits on the north and the east, Arden Way on the south, and Steelhead Creek on the west. And additionally, that permit would be triggered when located within 1,000 feet of any residentially zoned property or existing residential use, a K through 12 school, a child care center, a medical clinic or office, or senior housing. All of these conditions would need to be met for a conditional use permit to be required. The project must be located within one of the listed zones, within the boundary area defined, as well as within the buffer radius of 1,000 feet from those uses or conditions that are identified on the slide. Okay, thanks for your patience. I'm going to pause there. It's been just about 20 minutes. I'm not seeing any questions come in the Zoom platform, but what I would like to do is I'll stop the screen share in just a moment and we'll move into our question and answer and comment period. If you're online, just look for the reactions button and then click the raise your hand. We'll see that on our end, and what that does is it enables us to know you'd like to talk for one, and secondly, to unmute your microphone. If you're on a mobile device today, look for the More tab and then the raise your hand. And finally, if we have any call-in users, I am not seeing any call-in users, so I will forego those instructions. Okay. I've stopped the screen share. Let me catch up to our participants. Okay, I saw a hand raised a moment ago. If anyone would like to speak, now would be the time. Don't be shy. Ronald Davey, thanks for joining. I'm going to click allow to talk on my end. It'll prompt you with a question on yours. Just click yes.
Well, I didn't want to have you feel that people weren't responding here. So, although I certainly didn't anticipate that I would be the first to speak, as you know, because I've sent emails to you, I own a small 4-unit industrial warehouse on Pell Industrial Park, and I had. Along with my leasing agent, Jeff Kavarmi, there was a boundary map that was called Industrial Owners Proposed Boundaries. And that would essentially sort of eliminate the 3 industrial parks from the coverage of this ordinance. Now, and that would be the Appel Industrial Park, the Norwood Industrial Park, and the Raleigh Industrial Park. Now that to my mind, I might say that in terms of seeing some of those big truck storage yards, those do sort of look highly incompatible with residential use. And now I was a little puzzled by what seemed to me to be almost, maybe I misunderstood, but an ass backward approach in the sense that it looked like you were saying there were some areas that were zoned industrial, and then somehow a house got in there. And now because the house got in there, you were defeating the whole purpose of an industrial park and making the industrial person, jump through a whole bunch of hoops that nobody would otherwise have intended. Now, I might say this, insofar, I don't know, I can't say that I know that much about the Norwood Industrial Park or the Raleigh Industrial Park, but, Pale Drive Industrial Park is almost a misnomer in the sense of it just consists basically of one street with the circle dead end at the end. Okay. I mean, I've seen industrial parks, and let me tell you, I sort of wish my warehouse was in some fancy dancy industrial park. I just view this as just a solitary street. And I don't see any, and there's not, and you can shoot me dead if you can spot a single residence anywhere along Pale Drive. So, it sort of seems to me that all of these concerns of when I see these big giant truck yards sitting in areas that are outside those established industrial areas, those do look like exactly the kind of thing that rational people concerned with zoning want to address. I mean, that's why you have zoning. That's the whole point of zoning, right? So you don't have those mixed and incompatible uses. So anyway, where I'm headed, of course, is how much indigestion do you think I've sent an email to everybody, to the 9 council members. And I know you've seen the map also called that has a yellow, it's got the red boundary lines, which are your proposed boundaries. And then it has boundaries in yellow, which are the industrial owners' proposed boundaries. And they include just the 3 industrial parks. Now, from Ron Davies' standpoint, and I wouldn't have indigestion if only Pell was excluded from your map. I mean, that's where I'm being bitten. But in logical consistency, I suppose if you eliminated Pell, you'd want to eliminate all 3. Anyway, does that proposal of eliminating the 3 cause you any indigestion, or does it seem greatly incompatible with the goals that you're seeking to accomplish?
Thanks for joining, Ron. I appreciate you continuing the dialogue. All of your comments and questions are helpful to staff to understand you have a particular background and experience. You're a property owner of a multi-tenant industrial building, so I do want to just send some appreciation for everything that you brought to the table and in our correspondence. What I'd like to say in response is that we are here tonight for a community meeting to get input, and predating that, this meeting has been a proposal for a different boundary than the current draft ordinance depicts, and that sort of all voices are intended to be considered. And it would be premature of me to say, what are the merits of one versus the other. I think I could give a little bit of insight into there's a question that has been posed in the Q&A about the boundaries. So I think I'd like to sort of indirectly respond to that, and in terms of the 3 areas. It might give some insight into the internal thinking of staff of, why Pell Drive, why Norwood, or why, up northeast in Robla, adjacent to the airport. What we were looking for was permit activity, things that were in fact happening and real. We were looking for what are the rules and how does that relate? And then we looked at what's happened, what's on the ground already. There is, as you've noted, there is an incompatibility that exists in some locations, and that's a function of history that I can't unwind, that's present today, that I think is sort of ingrained in the topic of environmental justice that we have, for better, for worse, or somewhere in the middle. There have been decisions before us that have had consequences. They may have been unintended consequences, but there's some things that don't work quite as well as they could. Things are not as complete or as equitable or fair or equal. And so what I'm looking at, in terms of the different areas, we were looking at where would be the most acute incompatibility based on permit activity. It was very much present in the rural area up in the Northeast area. And there are some other occurrences to the south. When you get into the Norwood area, there is a circulation network where trucks have to go by homes to get into the park. If you look at the Pell
Now,
area,
does that also apply to Pell, or is Pell sort of not so bad?
I'm getting there.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate you giving me lots of space and time to reply. And what for Pell, I appreciate your comments. And in looking at that, there is an adjacency. There are residential homes that do back up onto the park. The park is a little bit different from the other two areas in that it does have a looped, sort of a cul-de-sac road that does connect to Interstate 80. And it does so along a federally designated, what we call an STAA, Surface Transportation Act designated route. So this is a route that the federal government has identified for very long trucks. So that is present in the Pell area. So I would say we're reevaluating and looking into the comments that you've raised on the Pell area, and specifically with regard to the circulation and how it may be different from the other areas that were brought up in that proposal. And then I think the last thing I wanted to say in response, I do have just two other speakers and some questions, Ron, but was, is this choice about what to do from a legislative standpoint of, do you approach it from the housing perspective of putting regulations on housing? Do you put it on, or do you put it on industry? As I think there's a difficult balance to strike here. And it is, I think, very challenging to tackle environmental justice, period, is that you're talking about history of decisions that require not only regulatory action, but also investment in real dollars in capital projects. So what I'm seeing is that we do want to accommodate industry. The rules provide for them by right. We do at the same time want to have an additional level of oversight, which would provide more than we have today. So the idea would be less harm to residents, and that would be evaluated under a different permit process, which is the conditional use permit. So whereas we would just today look at how attractive or the aesthetics of an industrial business that was brand new, we would look beyond the property into what would be the activities. How many trucks? Is it 55 trucks, 500 trucks? What's the activity that would extend to the neighboring parcels and out into the neighborhood? So this conditional use permit adds a level of regulatory authority that's not intended to prohibit the use, but it is also a discretionary permit where conditions can be imposed. And it is likely that not every site will be the right site, and some projects may be too much in terms of their intensity of use. So the idea is that the commission would vet the merits of these applications if they're new development. If you're an existing business, you would be provided what's called a deemed CUP. You don't have to apply for anything. You are granted, if you're a lawfully established business, a conditional use permit. You may not change that without consulting the city in terms of additional permit requirements. So I think I'll pause there. Ron, if you could allow me a little bit of space to get to others. I think we don't have a whole lot of folks. So if you could sit tight for a minute, and if you want to speak again and we have time, I'll call you back up. Sound good?
Great.
Thank you, sir. All right, Lana, I see a question from Lana Moffett about why was the area between Arden Way and the industrial areas south of Highway 116 not included in this proposal? I touched on this a moment ago in terms of what we were focusing on. Why did we not go south of Arden Way or that in that general area is what I saw in my review was a more complete street network. That we had complete streets, meaning in the basic sense that they had pavement, they had curb, gutter, sidewalk, and that they were in some instances just frankly buffered and not next to neighbors or in the immediate vicinity of homes. So I hope that answers your question. If not, you're certainly welcome to raise your hand and clarify. What I'll do now, I see a couple more questions popping up. Diana, I see you have your hand raised. I'm going to unmute your microphone.
Thank you.
Hi.
So I had a couple of questions about the permit approval. I think you just mentioned one, and it sounds like it's going to be pretty much what's required of the company is going to be pretty much on a review each individual basis. It's not going to be a set type of requirements for mitigating the effect on the residential area around them.
The
Like,
ordinance.
what will, you know, what you said that the conditional permit, they're going to have these things they need to meet those criteria put in the previous slide. It's going to what they need to meet to require this permit. But I mean, to get that's going to cause them to have a permit. But what do they do? What's that permit going to require them to do in order to mitigate things?
Understood. Thanks for the question, Diana, and thanks for joining us tonight. So what it will require an application. It will require plans, so it will show what this the new development would consist of, or a substantial change, major change to an existing business. What would be required are a few basic components. First, there would be a staff analysis in advance. So there would be a dialogue beyond the aesthetics. So we would look at the land use activities and be able to evaluate that and provide recommendations to an applicant. And also that would be provided through early notice to neighbors. Every application that's discretionary that's submitted to the city receives an early notice. That is a director level, or in this case, a commission level. This would get early notice. What that would eventually lead to is a public hearing. And so that is a requirement that would be along with a commission level decision. You go to essentially City Hall, you receive a notice is provided in advance, a staff report is published, and a majority of the commission would weigh the merits of that particular application. And they would either approve it, they would approve it with conditions, or they could also theoretically deny an application. Does that answer your question?
Actually, not the process of applying to get the permit.
Okay.
But what will they be doing to mitigate the harm? You said the intent, you said idea would be to create less harm to residents. So you're admitting there's going to be harm, but the intent is to create less harm. So you're trying to find some kind of compromise because there's already this existing, that's what you said, this existing industrial park use and residential use that are in conflict. And you're trying to be fair, quote unquote. So how will this fairness show up in mitigation for the effects on the residents when you decide that this entity deserves approval of that conditional permit?
Thank you for clarifying. So here's the challenge, is that I could give you examples about how that might show up. However, each individual project is going to drive what mitigation would be necessary, and if it would be necessary. So in many respects, the core solution here is to provide a process, and then how that process evolves will enlighten staff. It will inform the public what the project is, what each individual project, each site, they're not identical. We would evaluate them on a project by project basis. So if we had a very large truck-oriented land use that's subject to the ordinance. It was directly adjacent to existing residential homes. We would look at, for example, at what are the noise sources? What activities are occurring on that parcel? Are there generators? Are there trucks? Are there trailers with refrigerated units that are staged next door to neighbors? Is there HVAC equipment? We would look at what is the potential noise impact. For air quality, we would look at, well, what are the sources of air emissions? That could be a stationary source. So what is in the building? What is a piece of equipment that's emitting emissions into the air? How is that related to a sensitive land use next door? It could be the refrigerated units that may or may not have diesel, or they have maybe electrical power, but we look at what are the parking of trailers on site. And then additionally, mobile emissions, how are those circulating out into the neighborhood? Those are just a few examples, but I'm hesitant to say specifically what would come out, but the process is the primary objective here.
Right, I understood. That's why first I said it was probably going to be, each review was going to be individual because each business could be a little different. But on the other hand, wouldn't there be some standards? There are already some standards about amount of air pollution, particularly on Norwood, one of the most highly polluted, and most of that is from this traffic. The what's released into the air from the trucks.
Yeah.
So aren't there some kind of like minimum at least standards, no matter what, that some of them would need to meet in order to meet the noise level, the air quality, right? And then the options they might have in order to do these things, those are in the climate plan, like the planting of trees, certain kinds of barriers.
Yeah, no, good point, Diana. Thanks for sticking on this. So here's what I'm thinking is that, yes, there are some standards today. They're generalized standards, for example, through the California Environmental Quality Act. So if this would be a discretionary action that would be subject to what we call CEQA, or the California Environmental Quality.
All right, that's what.
So yeah, so that is the one regulatory process. This is also an interim ordinance, so it's a bridge between today and a future longer term solution, which could arrive at it will involve additional study and similar or different standards that would be imposed through a modified process in a permanent ordinance. So I hope that answers your questions. I see a few others, and also our council member who wants to chime in. If I could ask you to sit tight. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you.
Hi, council member.
Hi, Kevin. First of all, thank you so much to yourself and the rest of the staff for putting this event together. I know that you guys are working diligently to make sure that all the questions and concerns are answered. I have a few questions that I've received calls, and one is this new ordinance, which we're still working on. How would it affect the existing operators? If we do go on a CUP, a conditional use permit, would that be issued automatically to the current businesses? And if so, if a current business tries to sell its building or its business to a like or same type of business, how would, as of right now, does your office, have you done any kind of studying on that, on how to approach those situations? And those are all my questions for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great questions. I was anticipating some of those at our next meeting that was sent specifically to the industrial property owners, all industrial zone properties. But so what happens under current city code, it's not included in this ordinance. Existing city code, when a new ordinance is passed, in this example, it is granted, for example, imposing a CUP, that is deemed approved. So an existing lawful business that has been established will not need to file for any application. They are granted a deemed CUP. Now, if they want to change their operation, for example, if they'd like to acquire a parcel next door, they'd like to add to a building, make it taller, make it a larger building footprint wise, then they would need to consult with the planning division and have us help them with, is this a minor or a major modification? There are separate processes for both of those categories that have differing levels of review. So existing businesses may continue to operate indefinitely. They would be a deemed CUP. Now, let's say your second question, you own a property, business today. You decide I'm going to retire, or I'm moving on to something else. The deemed CUP does not go with the business owner. The deemed CUP goes with the land and that land use activity. And so there is no transaction that the city is monitoring in a real estate sense that would need to trigger or would trigger any additional permit requirement from the city. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, Robla Park. I see you next on the list. I'm gonna click to unmute.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Hi, I was able to quickly put some notes in your chat there as well, to save some time, but I particularly want to focus on the deemed CUP and the Pell Drive and Pell Circle corridor. Understanding the comments that Mr. Ronald, Mr. Davey made, I'm primarily more focused on the east side of Pell Drive, which you did mention in conversation. And so, as you know, there are approximately 40 to 60 homes that back up to the Pell Industrial Park area. Those homes existed prior to that. And so when you look at that section and you look at the homes, as you look around that, starting in Main Line, which is the newest building that was built a few years ago, and community members sent a lot of concerns about that. Very little setbacks, right, from their backyards. And so when you follow that that geographical lining all the way around Pell onto Main Avenue, and you look at the existing buildings, and then you'll see a patch of land there that hasn't been kind of developed on. Not really sure who owns that parcel, but there is a green belt back there. I think it might be the Seek property, because there's an access which shows some off-roading that goes into the back of those homes. And so the concern has been for many, many years that the industry continues to grow, but there is literally zero lot line to where the industrial park, the trucking activity, trucks running, people looking out their backyard, seeing open trucks, the clinking and the running of the trucks and things like that already exists. So when you look at that and we say, okay, well, I hear the business owners saying, well, we should be not included in that. We're only looking at those thoughts are only looking at what's happening on the street, but not what those impacts are happening, existing impacts that are happening now that are really impacting people's everyday lives, right? And so, the deemed CUP to allow that to continue without coming up with a solution to mitigate the current impacts that are happening now and have been happening a long time, kind of seems like a missed opportunity to correct a lot of the ills that happened that shouldn't have been happened, that should have been considered in the very beginning. And that the building, the main sales building on Pell Circle 3755 is the perfect example of what will continue to happen if you don't come up with some real mitigating solutions for the existing problems now, to minimize it now. So I just wanted to mention that as very, very critical and very, very important to that area, which is inclusive of all of those businesses, Mark Stein, Leisure Supply. You know, if you follow the Bolenbacher parcels in the properties, right, which in the neighborhood, that definitely has to be addressed. And I don't know what the solutions are, but I will say this, is that when cannabis came on board, this is a similar issue that people were concerned about not having proper setbacks or planting or noise barriers or, you know, kind of all of these things that currently exist. And now we have some of those very large warehouses actually share and have multi-use with CUPs in them. And so we have a combination of things that are going on that really need to be addressed, not just Pell, but throughout the entire areas of Robla. So I just wanted to draw the attention to that. And then the sharing of the road. The residents off of Kelton, Main Avenue, and all of those areas, we only have 1 to 2 ways out. We share that road, right? Where we shop and recreate and access to the freeway is through Main Avenue to North Gate to Del Paso Road. And so you have a combination of those things happening as well. And one other thing is that I will say that we have seen some improvements by the truckers to not come down Pell, Main Avenue to Norwood. However, it still happens because we continue to grow with other type of uses along that area when these businesses change their uses, or I would say the leases, when they change, we still see those type of things happening as well. And so all that is that Pell Drive should not be excluded, but even a more keen eye to look at how that function and the operations of those existing buildings or businesses impact the residents, and what can we do to mitigate those existing issues.
Thanks so much for joining and bringing those to my attention. It's partly why I really like these types of meetings. I get to hear what you're seeing and experiencing. I don't live in this particular part of town, so thanks for those comments. I think if I could think of a response, you know, first, you know, I would encourage you to continue to participate in this process. I'll describe what the next steps will be so that your voice can continue to be heard. We are going to take all comments today and move them forward as best we can through the process, but that's certainly no substitute for you to share what your thoughts are with our elected officials at a future meeting. What this interim ordinance is attempting to do is to strike a balance between our anticipated general plan adoption and the implementation of that policy that I mentioned. That's an environmental justice policy, to have a long-term solution. So interim is intentional and deliberate. If it's not adequate or satisfactory in your opinion, I understand. But I do want to just share with you that is the intention here, is that we're moving with a certain sense of urgency and speed as requested by the legislation sponsor, and we found a mechanism to have an intended effect that it won't solve everything today, but is intended to be a first step. As I understand it, this is the first regulatory change that has been contemplated in the city that is specifically environmentally justice focused. So I'd anticipate a whole lot more conversation that would happen. What's there today is an existing business. We can't abate it through regulation. It will stay. If it's lawful, it may stay and continue as it will. If they change that, then we can impose requirements. So I hear all your comments. They've been recorded, and thanks again for joining us. I do sincerely appreciate it. All right, I see a few more hands raised. Hopefully I'm saying this right. Lana Moffett. I'm going to click ask to unmute.
There we go.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted a clarification on your response to my written question. If I understood you correctly, you reviewed the south of 160 industrial area in terms of a street structure, sidewalks, gutters, things of that nature. Did you have any review of the adjacent residential area? Because that's where I am, and that's where the challenge is with the continued development without, and I'm not suggesting that the development over there is something that we would want to discourage, but we would like an understanding of the impact on this neighborhood. And principally, there's air quality issues, of course. It's easily within 1,000 feet of residential areas on the northern part of that industrial area. It's also very close to a senior living center over on Leisure Lane. But in the Woodlake neighborhood, the street sidewalk structure is just simply can't support it. Can't support the kind of traffic. There are like 2 or 3 streets that are clogged every day with the traffic coming from that area, and a lot of them are very large trucks. Some of those trucks can't even make the turn, they get stuck. And so I'm wondering if you considered adjacent residential areas, which would be essentially cut-through areas. They're shortcuts to Natomas, to Arden Way, those areas, rather than maybe taking 160. And what I would be interested in seeing is some conditions put on any future developments, and there are some in the planning proposal cycle, as I understand it, that in fact communicate that, and the expectation that they plan their truck routes and even employee and customer routes so that they are not clogging these 24-foot wide streets. So
Thanks.
was there any consideration of those impacts?
Well, I will certainly consider your comments today. I can assure you of that. And look further into the specific area. Lana, we may have spoken on the phone. You're jogging my memory too. About circulation in and around the Woodlake area.
Yes, we did. Before the Law and Legislation Committee meeting.
Thank you. Good to hear your voice again. Yeah, so what I can, that's my first thought, is to first share with you that we will consider that in terms of the boundary and how it was defined. And what I think what I would characterize is that in this particular ordinance is a land use, it's in zoning ordinance, so it pertains to private property, and that is the regulatory mechanism we're looking at. It isn't a regulatory process to redesign the roadway network. So we're really on an interim basis looking at what's happening on private property and how things are going out into the neighborhood. I think with the intensity of land use on a private property, that's a factor in consideration. But we're in terms of reorienting traffic, that's not intended. But I think I understand your point, where roads are substandard, and you've enlightened me in terms of some of the roadway network in your particular area that may have similar characteristics. So I'll have a look at that. I think is the best I can say tonight.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Let's see, got just a couple other hands raised. Robla Park, I see your hand raised again. Happy to come back to you, but I'm going to go first to Scott.
Yes, hi there.
Hi, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. I represent one of the business owners in that Pell Industrial Park. And I guess I wanted to get some clarification on exactly what happens in the event. I understand that we can operate our business. We're a business owner and a property owner. We can operate our business in the building we currently own and occupy with no issues. I guess, lack of a better word, we're grandfathered in, it sounds like, for the foreseeable future. The concern would be what happens if and when, if we ever decide we want to sell the building or lease the building. I'd like to make sure I understand how we could potentially be impacted. Our concern would obviously be if a new owner or tenant would come in and be severely limited in the uses that they can do in that building, then there's the potential of us being significantly impacted negatively in terms of the value of our building. So I thought I heard maybe you or someone else mention that that the use that we currently do, as long as there's no changes in the size of the building, or that if we want to expand our building, I'd like to clarify, if we keep our building in the same footprint that it currently is and we sell it or want to lease it out, is the new owner or buyer, or is the new tenant going to be impacted in terms of the uses that they'll be allowed to do in that building?
Understood. So let me, I have a couple of thoughts on that. We get really nuanced and detailed in terms of the code, but so I think we can get into it here. What if I don't get to all of your questions tonight? We can certainly talk more offline. What if you are, for example, you own an existing building, has one or more tenants in it currently. They are either permitted by right under the existing zoning, or if this ordinance is passed, they are the same, or they're granted what's called the deemed CUP. And what I would encourage you to do as a building owner or a business owner is to first be in compliance with the city's business operating tax certificate process, or otherwise known as a business license in many other jurisdictions. All businesses in the city of Sacramento should have a business operating tax certificate. That is for not land use purposes, that's for taxation purposes, but it is a city record that serves as a reference point for my staff and planning division staff generally to acknowledge, to know that a business came in and applied for that and obtained approval. We are part of the review process for those certificates, and we do confirm applications are for land uses that are allowed to occupy particular property and zone. That's a very good way to have a chain of records that demonstrates you were in existence with this ordinance. If it were to pass, you were there you were there, and we have a record to refer to if there's any question about what was the business that occupied that space. Sometimes that can get lost in translation in real estate transactions. Sometimes they're really close in terms of communication. Other times there's many people involved in a transaction. So I think I would advise that you have a business, you and or your tenants have a business operating tax certificate for that business in the event of a future sale or transfer, so that we can review the documentation and confirm that it's the same use. Well, what if what if the business is different? This ordinance doesn't prohibit any uses under the current zoning. It increases the permit requirement. So if you did have a new land use that were subject to the ordinance, we would want to look to see, is it in fact a true expansion? Our intention is not to put existing businesses out of business, but where there is a true expansion, there is a modification application process whereby we would determine, is the change. There are criteria for this, by the way, in the code for determining between a minor and major. What are the factors to consider? And there is a lesser level of review. There is, for a minor, it is a staff level review, and for a major, it is a zoning administrator. So for myself, that would be a review that would occur at my level, not the commission. I'll pause there. Did that answer your questions, Scott?
A little bit. I've got quite a few thoughts. What I think might be best is for me to just reach out to you offline and make sure I'm clear on how this might impact us.
Yeah.
But just as one final thought for everyone to hear, I just would love to know that you and the committee who's making this decision are all considering the potential very negative impacts on property values. Should this go into effect when people bought properties when it was zoned for a specific use with the expectation they'd be able to do that, or anyone in that building would be able to continue doing that forever. This is a pretty big impact in not a good way. So I'll leave you with that, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate yours in return, and thank you for joining us in those comments. You reach out, my email's in the advertisement, and we can connect there. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Robla Park, hi. Your mute on my hello again.
Just a quick question about the general plan and how this parlays into that with infrastructure, capital improvement infrastructure, much needed infrastructure improvements in the Robla area, as shown. You use Santa Ana as, you know, an example. However, there are, you know, some other roadways that are currently impacted by that. Is this working in line with that in terms of the approving these type of uses or allowing expansion for those that are currently operating that way, some of which are operating not in compliance? And so I was just curious about that.
Yeah, well, that's a big, well, so is it working how is it working with the general plan? So what I think, if we're talking about environmental justice as a topic broadly, it is just one action. It's a land use and zoning measure that would be new regulation, and it wouldn't necessarily be the only or final regulation as indicated in the title, interim. So it is a bridge between two points. I don't know where the bridge will land and what the details of a future permanent ordinance would be. At a minimum, our intent is to not be working at cross purpose of what is the environmental justice element intending to accomplish. There is, for example, in the general plan, there are other elements. There's a mandatory circulation element or mobility element, sometimes called. So basically, how do people get from point A to point B on their feet, on wheels, whether it's a bike or a car or other modes of transit, and that's a mandatory element of state law. It pretty frequently intersects with what we call a capital improvement program, which is a document that needs to be found to be consistent with the general plan, that the council says this is where we'll spend our money. It's a financial document that plans out and prioritizes investment. And so that is another component of the general plan that could be influenced by the environmental justice element as well. So I think that's the best I can do in terms of what does this ordinance do with the general plan? It's an interim measure to advance a policy that we fully expect will be adopted, and so that further study could be put towards this particular land use issue in the area that's identified, and more broadly the whole city. And I can't speculate where it will go, but we will be looking at this further. I expect we'll talk about this more at future meetings. But hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I'm running out of hands, but I do see Ron Davey. Thanks for raising your hand again. I'll unmute your microphone.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah, okay. Just a couple of random comments. As my first comment related to that issue of, hey, can you guys change the boundaries to make the problem go away as it applies to my property in Pell Drive? Now, let's say for whatever reason, nobody was inclined to do that. Then I would be trying to focus then on the language. Now, when you look at the legislation, it said it had a list under section 3A that five items were listed. Okay, so I had items 2, 3, and 4 related solely to trucks and what you did with trucks. None of those, I don't believe any of those give me any indigestion. Now, I might be mistaken, but I don't see anything that would give me indigestion, let's say on some theoretical level, that's not likely to occur. But items 1 and 5 potentially do to a different degree. One of the big mysteries I had was here being an owner of an industrial warehouse. One of the conditions is I or some future tenant might be faced with having to get a conditional use permit to do the activity of warehousing. Now, that to my mind seems so, I'm at a loss for words as to how inconsistent that is. In other words, there are certain kinds of buildings, everybody knows what kind of a building is. In other words, there's retail strip malls. And if you design an existing retail strip mall and it's been in existence 34 years, and then somebody comes up with legislation that says, if you want to actually sell retail in that building, you need a conditional use permit. You go, wait a minute, that's beyond contemplation as to how that could arise. The word warehousing could, and then there's the issue, the next word was distribution center. I don't think my warehouse faces any indigestion over the word distribution center because I'm thinking that's more like an Amazon warehouse with a zillion docks. My warehouse, 36,000 square feet, 4 units as a single dock. I don't think in any shape on a logical basis that I or a future tenant would ever be faced with a claim that we were operating a distribution center. Although, having just pointed out how bizarre things can get when my warehouse can't be used as a warehouse without a conditional permit, who knows, right? And then the third issue relates to contractor storage yards. Now, I don't know I did see all those pictures of trucks, and those gave me some indigestion in terms of, well, not into me personally, but I did see the rational needs for a zoning person to be concerned possibly with big giants, truck storage operations such as I saw in your picture. Now, I don't think that exists on Pale. There may have been one place on Pale on the west side at one time that at least had a number of trucks parked there and didn't actually have a warehouse building. Okay, but outside of that one lot, I wasn't aware of any of that kind of activity. But anyway, back to contractor storage yards. Is there a definition of contractor storage yards that explains why that's the purpose? I'm thinking that a small storage yard contiguous to a warehouse space that's smaller than the actual lease grounds, that's not going to cause any indigestion on the part of you as a zoning administrator. And so those are the 3 words: address why warehouse is there, distribution center, and then contractor storage yard.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So yeah, you're good. What I'm gonna ask is if we could have a subsequent conversation. What you're bringing up are getting really into the those are defined terms that are in the code. They have definitions that are attached to them that someone like myself or my staff would use to determine what is the business, what is the category of land use, what is warehouse distribution. There are generalized categories that we use as administrators of the code to determine what is the business and where in the zone is it appropriate to locate there. So I'd like to review the definitions in detail with you, have a better understanding of your building after our prior conversations. And maybe I can help you better understand how those categories might or might not apply to your property. I think many of them would not apply. For example, truck storage and parking is you have a building essentially covering your parcel. It's not essentially a parking lot, which we have had applications been approved that are essentially just pavement. They are paved to provide for parking of trucks and the trailers, and that's not, I think, what you have on your property is a warehouse, distribution center, land use, but it has, sort of ancillary parking spaces because you need to have that pursuant to the parking code for the city. So let's get into the details a little bit more. If you'd like to set up a time, we could do that separately. Does that work?
Well, yes, I think so. Also, I'm going to be, you have the Zoom meeting tomorrow, again, 1.5 hours. I'm going to be attending that because I'm really interested.
Okay.
I might say at my age of 81, even though I'm a retired lawyer and once had a fairly good mind, I have to confess that things still seem fuzzier than I would really like. But anyway, maybe I just made a mistake by mentioning those 3 categories and not just focusing on the word warehousing. Maybe you could address just that one. How can a warehouse that's like mine, that's been in existence? I've owned it 34 years and I think it goes to 42 years of existence. How could anyone think that in the future, Ron, well, you bought this warehouse, but somebody's going to come along later and tell you've got to get a special permit to use it for what is obviously its very intended purpose. Now, how did that come about?
Yeah, well,
Just that
that's
one word.
Yeah, understood. Well, I mean, it's a category for a land use. So if someone wants to build a new warehouse distribution center at a vacant parcel somewhere else within the ordinance boundary, we do think it would be prudent to have a look at that.
I meant just the word
for you, but
I just meant the word warehousing, not the distribution center. That's a separate thing.
Yeah, well, I think that's the rub here, is that it's the same in my jargon, in my area, my professional area here in terms of city code, maybe the comma is confusing. The way I can point you to the code, it's defined.
Oh, it's tied together.
Distribution center, comma, warehouse. So it's the same thing, that it's 3 words. The way it's punctuated is perhaps confusing, but it is essentially, it's the same business. Yeah, there's no difference in law in city code.
Okay, in other words, if it says warehousing distribution center, that's not as much a concern to me as just the word warehousing. And I thought the word warehousing could be dealt with separately, which essentially kills the very essence of my business.
Yeah, no, the 3 words go together, and I'll send you a follow-up email and point you to the definition so you can see.
Okay, you did answer my question. Thank you. And I will say that's reassuring and takes away some of the discomfort. Okay.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate you joining us again for your time tonight. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. I'm scrolling through the Q&A. I see a number of questions that were posed by speakers actually already, so I will skip past those. I see a new question that I hadn't heard from a speaker that says, will the air quality be monitored in the long term? How will this permitting process mitigate the quality of life now and for future growth? So as to the first question, the ordinance that's being considered is not intended to provide for long-term air quality monitoring in a literal sense, where indirectly it would apply to development that might contribute air emissions, and that we would evaluate the emissions essentially before they begin. Or if they begin, is that this regulation would impose a permit process to look at the emissions before they happen. So hopefully that relates to the second question in terms of the process, is that this would be a discretionary process, a public process, including notice and hearing, that would invite all parties to the table to provide input on projects as they are proposed. So I hope that answers your question. I don't see any other new questions from folks who have not already spoken. We have 13 attendees, and I don't see any hands raised. Just say that before I transition into next steps. We're just about at 7:20, so I think we're ending right on time. What I'll do in lieu of any hands raised is just provide an overview of what are our next steps with this interim ordinance. We are going to have another meeting tomorrow that is the same presentation, the same format, and we're going to collect all those comments that we receive, and including any that were emailed in response to the advertisements to myself. And we're going to review those as staff and group them into themes or issues or questions that are new to us. And when that occurs, we'll look into it and do some more analysis. I think what that's going to lead to, we are in between the Law and Legislation Committee of the Council, is a subset of members of the City Council that have considered the ordinance and passed it on to City Council for review. With the request that we have additional community input, which we're doing today and tomorrow. What we'll do is review the comments and questions. I can't say for certain what we will do in response to them, but if you're curious, you'd like to stay engaged, my contact information is on the advertisement for the community meeting. You're welcome to reach out and check in. What's going on? What are we doing in response? We'll certainly be checking in with our council district offices, District 1 and 2, and let them know what we've observed in the community meetings and what they would like to see in moving forward, in particular District 2 for being the sponsor of the legislation. And what that will eventually lead up to is a city council meeting. A notice will be provided in advance. I don't have a specific date in mind. At this point, it's premature. But early 2024, I would say within the first quarter, so within the first 3 months of 2024, you might see this on a council agenda. And if you would like to, if you've got the notice for this meeting today, that means you're in a registered community group or neighborhood group with the city. That same list will be sent a distribution via email to notify you of the city council meeting. And we'll tell you the date and time. Meetings of the council are now only in person. There is no more Zoom for city council meetings. So do anticipate attendance in person or communication through the e-comment feature or a letter you can send in to a council member in advance. Are there any questions about next steps? If so, I certainly would like to address them before we conclude. Hi, Diana, I see your hand raised.
Hi. So Kevin,
Yeah.
are there considerations for the future then for the current facilities? It's the current facilities and those conditions that have affected the public health and safety at this point. That's the instigator for this ordinance, right?
Mhm.
So it's going to affect new businesses from what you've been saying, and existing businesses will be grandfathered in, and so will their properties as long as there's no changes. So they can continue to do whatever's been done into the future, and only new ones will be affected. So that still does, someone mentioned this before, does not alleviate the conditions that currently exist that caused this investigation to occur in the first place. So is there any considerations into the future, something in this ordinance or something else, where you're using the environmental justice legislation to you, state legislation to as a backdrop, is there anything going to work then for the existing? How do we mitigate the existing? Could there be incentives provided by the city to these companies? Because I understand it's going to cost them monies, but these are human beings and it's costing health. And so it's difficult for me to, I don't want to harm the businesses either, but I can't put dollars before people being able to breathe, children, you know, all those other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I would say is that this is an interim solution, and the permanent, if I could term it as that, it could be one or more solutions to get at the issues you're interested in, would come from the general plan being adopted by council, and that full policy I shared on the screen in the presentation, or that full policy being implemented. This does not fully implement the policy. This is one
Okay.
measure to take in response to it. So there could be many other actions that are taken to address existing businesses, or, you know, the issues you're identifying. Yeah, so we're
Oh.
not yet.
All right, thank you, Kevin.
You're
As
welcome.
long as there's still some hope for what's happening now. And I appreciated your presentation. I learned a bit more than I did just from reading the materials. I appreciate it. And I
Great.
appreciated your upfrontness about all the portions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback. I really do appreciate it. I sincerely appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, folks, I don't see any other hands raised. With that, one last scroll through. Okay, sorry. I do see some new questions. Let's see. Okay, I see a question about city council meetings being in person moving forward. Does that mean it won't be streamed, or that the public cannot participate via Zoom? It means that council meetings are in person only now. That is a change that the council, working with the city clerk's office, has made, I would say about a month and a half now that has been in effect. So they are in person. We are back to the old ways pre-pandemic. So if you have any further questions about why or the reasoning behind it, I encourage you to reach out to the city clerk's office. That's out of my area of responsibility, but I do know for certain they are in person. Let's see. There's also a question, where can we find information on the environmental justice element? What you could do is you could Google City of Sacramento General Plan Update. You can also email me and I can send you the specific hyperlink to the web page that includes the draft general plan document, including that environmental justice element. So if you found me, that probably means you have the email address, which I can actually. I'm gonna do a quick screen share here. Sorry, one last time. Seems appropriate. My email and phone number are on the slide here. That's my direct line. It goes to my phone. I will return your phone call. You contact me any of those ways, I can help you find the environmental justice element. All right, I see a couple of additional questions. Do I know when this item will likely go to council? First quarter of 2024. We have to get through our community meeting process, consider all the comments and questions, and then we have to get in the queue to get on an agenda and present this up. But we do have instruction to do this additional outreach, but not take too long to get back or to get this forward to council for consideration. Let's see, will the presentation be available to share? If you email me, I will happily share a PDF of this with you. We hesitated on creating a specific web page for this project. We were moving quite swiftly between from committee to council, so it's happy to share that with you. Also, is the Planning and Design Commission in person only? That is the case as well. This will not be going to that commission as an interim ordinance, but those meetings are in person only as well. Okay, I don't see any other questions or hands raised. With that, right on the dot, 7:30. I want to thank everybody for your time and participation today. Appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you more in the future. Have a good night.